In this video, we're diving into another seriously creepy case. This one's not for the faint of heart, so buckle up and let's get into it. 29-year-old Julia Traantano was last seen in the small Italian town of Sinago on the evening of May 28, 2012. She stopped answering calls and texts from family and friends when she was 7 months pregnant, and her phone went silent all of a sudden. It was her boyfriend, Alessandro Impagnatiello, who first told everyone that she wasn't there. He said that when he got home from work, the flat was empty, and he had no idea where his partner had gone. There were too many strange things going on in this case from the start. Julia had left most of her personal items behind, and her plans for the next few days didn't show that she was planning to disappear. As agents started to put together what she was doing in the last few days, they found even more disturbing information. Julia had a major argument with Alessandro the night before she went missing. She told her mother, Laura Donna, and a close friend about it in messages. She was very upset, and she wrote that the situation was making her feel very bad. But the most important question was still unanswered. What really happened that terrible night? Julia really did leave the house by herself, so why hasn't anyone seen her since? The next few days, detectives would start to pull apart a web of lies that would lead them to a terrible truth. Her birthday is May 2nd, 1994, and she was born in Naples. She was raised in a close-knit family that was always there to help and love her. From a young age, her parents taught her to be independent and have faith in herself. Even though they liked modern ideas, family customs were still very important to them, and she could always go home to find comfort and guidance. Julia went to a nearby school and did very well in the arts. She was interested in real estate because she liked architecture, looking for ways to make money, and the idea of becoming a great real estate agent. After high school, she went to college to get a degree in the field. Her analytical mind and good speaking skills helped her quickly become an expert in the field. By the time she was 25, she had a good name in the business. But this wasn't enough for Julia. She wanted to live in a big city where there were lots of chances. Her job in her hometown had hit a plateau by the time she was 26. She knew that the local market had its limits because she worked at a real estate business. She decided to move to Milan because of stories her friends told her. She thought the city would give her a new start full of opportunities. By the end of 2020, she had made up her mind. She saw Milan as a sign of freedom, new connections, and the job growth she wanted. She quickly made the move. She packed her things, said goodbye to her family and friends, and set off for the city she hoped would become her new home. Because Julia had just moved to Milan, she got right to work. The real estate market in the city moved quickly and was very competitive. You had to be sure of yourself and keep trying. She quickly adjusted, making friends, going to events for networking, and finishing deals. Her new life was exciting, but she was bored with all of her plans and wanted something more: to be happy. This is when she met Alessandro Impagnatiello. They met at a bar in Milan where her co-workers had invited her to celebrate a deal that went well. It was Alessandro's job to serve drinks at a fancy club inside a 5-star hotel. He was friendly, open, and naturally good at getting along with others. He was a year older than Julia. She was drawn to his confidence and charm. With him, she felt like she could unwind, forget about the stress of work for a while, and just enjoy the moment. They had a smooth start to their relationship in the first few weeks. They went to restaurants, walked around the city at night, and talked about the future at night. Alessandro told her that he had a son from a previous relationship, but he told her that he was moving on with his life and that his past was behind him. Julia was sure she had finally found someone she could be with for a long time. They fell in love quickly and chose to move in together after only a few months. Julia really hoped that moving to Milan would support her work and make her happy as a person. She was sure that Alessandro was the one she was supposed to spend the rest of her life with, but she didn't know what secrets he was keeping or how much her choice would change her life. The year 1993 saw the birth of Alessandro Impagnatiello. Even though he seemed sure of himself, his life in Milan was anything but steady. As a bartender at a fancy place, he was always surrounded by rich people, famous people, and great business people. This helped him carefully create the image of a man used to living in style. He was good at making people feel comfortable, quick to connect with others, and a master of persuasion. He always kept his true goals hidden by being charming and laid back. He made a steady income and made good friends at the bar where he worked. He knew how to put himself in the best light, making it look like he was trying to get more. His co-workers thought he was charming, but a bit shallow. They thought he never really opened up, but always seemed like a fun, relaxed person. His clients and friends thought he was living the dream, but there was a lot more going on behind this carefully curated picture. There didn't seem to be any red flags when he started dating Julia. Instead, in the beginning of their friendship, he seemed interested and caring. He knew just the right thing to say to make a good impression. But as time went on, Alessandro's true self started to show. They were having problems with each other. Soon after they moved in together, the first red flags started to show. Alessandro and Julia often made jokes at each other, but over time, his jokes got meaner. He would say mean things about her speech, implying that people from southern Italy were not at all like people from northern Italy. He made fun of her favorite sports team in public, even though he knew how much it meant to her. At first, Julia didn't think much of it, because she thought it was just playing. But as time went on, it became clear that what he said was not just words. Their fights happened more often. Alessandro got angry over little things like how she arranged their home, how she responded to what he said, and how she answered his questions. She felt like she was in the wrong because he would cut her off in the middle of a talk or just ignore her. He became cold and detached during those times, but all of a sudden, he was back to being himself, as if nothing had happened. They got used to these mental ups and downs. He would be loving and thoughtful one day and not care about anything the next. Julia tried to figure out what was going on, but never got a clear answer. She was always unsure of what Alessandro was feeling because he never told her how he felt. But his double life was the biggest lie, and she didn't see it coming. Julia thought that Alessandro worked nights at a bar once he got home from work. He had been telling lies about his life for months, though. He began seeing someone else, Allegra, soon after they moved in together. He met Allegra at work. She was younger, spoke more than one language, and was working her way up in the hotel business. Alessandro pretended to be single and said that he was no longer seeing Julia. However, he was still living with her temporarily. He did a great job of keeping this lie going by telling Allegra that Julia was already looking for a new place to live and would be leaving soon. Julia and Allegra didn't know the other existed. He played a different role to each of them, making his lies so smooth that nothing seemed fishy. He lived in the present with one and talked about the future with the other. He never thought that his lie might come back to haunt him. At the same time, things kept getting worse between him and Julia. Something didn't feel right, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Unease grew over time, but Alessandro kept up his double act, not realizing that the truth was drawing near. Julia began to notice changes in her body by the end of 2022. She thought something was wrong because she was always tired, had strange urges, and missed her period. She got a pregnancy test because she didn't want to wait. This woman knew she was going to have a child when she saw two clear lines show. Feelings were mixed when I heard the news. She had always wanted to have a family, but things had been hard with Aleandro over the last few months. She knew she had to tell him in person, though. Julia nervously told everyone the news at the right time. She thought about all the different ways people might respond, from shock to happiness, and maybe even a little fear. But Alessandro's face could not be read. After being quiet for a few seconds, he asked her one question. "Are you sure?" Julia felt a chilling gap between them. It wasn't like he was interested in how she was feeling or how far along she was. It was impossible to ignore how uninterested he was. He never talked about it again in the days that followed. No plans for the future. No interest in upcoming doctor's visits. She felt alone, but she held on to the hope that he would eventually accept what had happened and start to show some support. Even though the new year started, Alessandro's mood didn't change. Julia found herself alone in the evenings more and more, thinking about her future. Even though she kept working and tried to concentrate on other things, she started to feel nervous. At the same time, Alessandro's secret life took a turn that no one saw coming. At the beginning of 2023, he found out that his other partner, Allegra, was also going to have a baby. He had no idea what the news meant. Along with Julia, Allegra didn't know there was another woman involved. She was sure she and Alessandro were together for good. But unlike Julia, Allegra wasn't sure if she wanted to keep the pregnancy going. As Alessandro saw that his carefully planned lie was coming apart, he persuaded Allegra that having a child wasn't the best idea at that time. He told her he would back her no matter what she did, but it was clear that he thought ending the pregnancy would be best. Allegra thought about it for a long time, and then agreed. As a way to end this story, Alessandro went with her to the medical procedure. He hoped that now that Allegra's pregnancy was over, he could deal with Julia's choice to have the baby, which he saw as his bigger problem. But Julia was determined to keep being pregnant, while Allegra wasn't. Even though he felt emotionally distant from her, he kept trying to get her to change her mind, but Julia wouldn't listen. She made this choice on purpose and on her own. Even though she knew her relationship with Alessandro was ending, she was ready to take care of the baby by herself. She had no idea that this choice would bring about a major change in her life. Alessandro knew he was losing control of the situation when Julia refused to have the abortion. Her strong choice messed up his plans, so he had to find another way to get away from what he saw as a problem. By the end of 2022, he had started to study drugs in a planned way. He looked all over the internet for ways to hurt people without getting caught. He looked at which substances were both powerful and hard to find. His study included chemicals found in everyday items, plant-based poisons, and even very dangerous chemicals like cyanide and ricin. But most of the choices he made were either too hard to get or left clear signs in the body. He finally decided on rodenticides, which are goods that are made to get rid of rodents. You could easily buy these over the counter, and they wouldn't raise any red flags. He also read that some types worked slowly, leading to internal bleeding, weakness, and anemia symptoms that were so similar to pregnancy problems that they were easy to mistake. Alessandro started carrying out his plan in early 2023. He started putting small amounts of the poisonous substance into Julia's drinks and food in the hopes that her health would slowly get worse. Within a few weeks, she started having strange symptoms like being constantly tired, dizzy, sick, and having sharp stomach pain. Julia told her friends that she was sick, but she thought it was just part of being pregnant. She had no idea that something much worse was going on. Even though Alessandro thought the effects would get worse faster, the poison wasn't working as fast as he had hoped. Angry, he kept looking for ways to make it stronger, but the results were still disappointing. Julia was still sick, but her body was fighting back, and the pregnancy was getting stronger. This made Alessandro very angry. His first plan had not worked, and now he had to think of another way to get out of this mess. It was easy for Alessandro to be in charge. He carefully planned his lies, knowing just what to say and how to make each woman believe his story of events. Julia thought he was just having a rough time and that he would get over what was happening with the pregnancy in time. Allegra, on the other hand, was sure that the relationship he was in before had finished a long time ago. But one wrong move broke the image he had worked so hard to make. It was the first thing that made Allegra suspicious that Alessandro became tense whenever they talked about his past. It was awkward for him to talk about his life before they met. He never showed her his social media or talked about his ex. At first, it didn't seem fishy, but as time went on, more and more problems began to show up. The real turning point was when she saw new pictures of him with Julia on his phone by chance. It was clear that they were still together because of the way they looked at each other and how close they were. Allegra didn't want to jump to conclusions, so she began to pay more attention and make notes in her head. He often said he had to leave work late in the evenings, but his co-workers at the hotel said he had actually left early. He would sometimes not answer his phone, and then make up reasons that didn't quite make sense. Alessandro didn't miss a beat when Allegra finally asked him about the pictures. Right away, he said that Julia couldn't accept that they broke up and was sharing those pictures on purpose to make him feel bad. Allegra really wanted to believe him, but his story didn't seem right. She asked more questions, and his answers became less and less believable. Alessandro quickly changed his strategy when he realized he was losing control. He said that Julia wasn't just unwilling to move on. She had also lied about being pregnant to hold on to him. He was now trying to get Allegra to believe that there was no baby, but her doubts were only raised by how desperate he seemed. As a last-ditch effort to make his lie even stronger, Alessandro even made up a DNA test. It was used as proof that he had nothing to do with the child, that he changed a file he had gotten online. Allegra at first believed this story of what happened, but she still had doubts. Something about her made her feel like she didn't know everything. After a few days, she chose to find out for herself. She used Alessandro's phone to call Julia while he was sleeping. The answer came back almost right away. Julia didn't sound like someone who was obsessed with getting even. She sounded like someone who wanted to know what happened. Allegra told them they should meet up in person the next day. Both women knew that what they were going to say would make things different. They met at the hotel where Allegra worked. They had already decided on a time, and both of them were tense and determined. Allegra still didn't know how much Alessandro was lying, and Julia couldn't believe that the man she had planned to marry had been living two lives. The talk began with care. Allegra spoke first and told what she had learned. She told Julia that Alessandro had told her that he was over with the woman he used to date. Then she brought up the so-called DNA test, which she said proved the baby wasn't his. Julia paid close attention. Allegra quietly told everyone that the test was fake when she was done talking. Her pregnancy timeline fit perfectly with the time they had been together, and she had never offered any kind of test. Even more important, she said that she and Alessandro were still living together, and that he had never made her think that they were no longer together. Allegra got a better picture of what was going on with each passing minute. From the very beginning, she had been tricked. Her whole view of their relationship changed, and she was sure of the truth for the first time. Even though she was hurt and disappointed, she didn't feel angry at Julia. In fact, it became painfully clear that they were both caught in the same web of lies. They talked for more than an hour. The two women talked about small details and put together the big picture of Alessandro's lie. As the game came to a close, they stopped seeing each other as foes and instead felt a strong bond. That's when Julia made her final choice. She was done. She didn't want to stay with a man who had played with her feelings and was hiding a second life. Alessandro had no place in her future. It was hers and her child's. When she got home, she didn't wait for the right time to talk to Alessandro. She did it right away, telling him she knew everything and that they were no longer together. His response was exactly what was expected. That's the first thing he said. Then he got angry and said she was looking into his private life. Julia didn't care about his reasons, though. She told him in a strong voice that she was leaving for Naples and didn't want to see him again. That night, she texted her mum and sister to tell them about her choice. They were there for her and offered to help in any way they could. Julia told them she would be back in a few days, but she had to take care of some things in Milan first. She had no idea it would be her last. Alessandro understood he had lost control after they talked. Everything he had hid was now out in the open. Julia knew the truth about his lies, his double life, and how he used people. She turned her back on him, stopped listening to him, and made up her mind to leave. He was angry that she was so cool, that he was in a position where his lie was found out and he had no control over it, made him feel helpless. He felt like he was losing power over both Julia and the image he had worked hard to create. His entire life might fall apart if she told anyone else. That day, they were so angry at each other that they broke up. Alessandro kept trying to talk, but Julia wouldn't listen. She kept packing her things without showing any expression. His anger grew as she kept quiet. She was thinking the wrong thing, Alessandro told her, because he loved her and she should change her mind. Julia didn't answer, though. He became more angry. He yelled very loudly to get her attention, but she wouldn't argue. When he knew her choice was final, he lost all control of his anger. He took a knife off the counter and hit with it in a fit of rage. Julia couldn't do anything because the attack came on quickly and accurately. He tried to stop, but it wasn't enough. Because he was scared and panicked, he kept going and lost all control. After 37 stab wounds, Alessandro stood over her body and stared. How bad what he had done really was. He had to get rid of the proof now. He knew that blood left marks, so he couldn't just leave things the way they were. He knew it wouldn't be enough to just hide the body. She was dragged to the bathroom, where he covered her in alcohol and set her on fire in the hopes that it would hide the crime. But what he thought the fires would do didn't happen. The fire burned, but it didn't destroy what was left. Fear set in. He didn't have a plan. He got some cleaning materials and rags and began scrubbing the blood off of the floor, walls, and furniture. Even though he scrubbed hard, the stains wouldn't come out fully. It still looked like a crime scene in the flat. Even though he knew he couldn't get rid of all the evidence of what had happened, he was still sure he could get out of being responsible. He didn't know that investigators would soon put all the pieces together and show that he was guilty. While Julia's body was still in the bathroom, Alessandro realized what he had done. His first thought was to hide his tracks. Even though he tried to burn the proof, it didn't work, so he had to come up with another plan. The first thing that had to be done was to make her disappear. He chose to make it look like Julia left on her own. He did this by taking her phone and starting to text her friends and family. He knew they would be scared if she disappeared all of a sudden, so he had to make it look like she had left on her own. He told her mom through text that she needed some alone time. The message was short and not very clear, which was just right to avoid making people suspicious. He then texted one of Julia's friends and said she had left, but wasn't ready to say where she was going. He wanted to buy some time so that it would look like she had just left on her own. But that wasn't the end of his plan. He was sure that someone would eventually call the police, so he did it himself just hours after the crime and said that Julia was missing. He said she had left the house after a fight and never came back. His story was easy to understand. He went to work that morning and found her gone when he got back. He added details on purpose to his story to make it sound more real. He told the police that her personal items, passport, and money were also gone, which made him think she might have left town by herself. Investigators paid close attention, but something didn't seem right from the start. He seemed shady and spoke with too much confidence, like he knew what questions would be asked. His calmness was scary because Julia's family and friends were scared and desperate for answers. In the meantime, while the police searched, Aleandro worked to hide the proof. He put her body parts in the bathroom at first, but he knew he couldn't keep them there for long. He put them in plastic wrap and sneaked them to the garage at night. Over the next few days, he moved the body parts more than once. First, he hid them in the basement of their building, and then he put them back in the garage. He was trying to figure out how to get rid of them for good, but the longer he put it off, the more mistakes he made. Investigators started to look closely at what he said, talking to his neighbors and looking for holes in his story. He thought he was still in charge, but police were already closing in on him. When Aleandro told the cops that Julia was missing, they did what they usually do in these situations. Of course, the first big sign came when forensic experts found blood in his car. Modern forensic technology let detectives find biological evidence, even though he tried to clean it. A quick test showed that the blood belonged to Julia. The second piece of proof was discovered in the apartment building's common areas. There were light red marks on the stairs and in the hallway that at first glance looked like dust or spilled liquid. But chemistry tests showed that they were actually traces of blood that had only been partly cleaned. Investigators also noticed that Aleandro was acting in a strange way. He didn't show real worry like most people do when a loved one goes missing. He didn't ask Julia's family for help in finding her, and he also didn't do anything to help get the word out that she had gone missing. He only did what was needed to officially report someone missing. He didn't do anything else, which made people even more suspicious. Detectives made a big discovery in the case when they looked at his electronics. They took his computer, phone, and tablet. They were shocked by what they found. To begin, they found search records from months before the crime. After reading about poisons, their effects, and how to hurt someone without being seen, he became more knowledgeable. Some searchers even tried to figure out why some poisons might not work the way they're supposed to. The fake DNA test he showed Algra was another important piece of proof. A forensic study proved that the document had been changed and the file had been downloaded from a website that let people change medical records. As more proof came in, it was getting harder for Aleandro to keep up his story. Investigators put more pressure on the suspects and pointed out each inconsistency one by one. At first, he stuck to his story and said he didn't know anything. But each time the cops questioned him, they showed him more facts he couldn't get away from. They showed him pictures of the bloodstains, asked him about his search history, and called in people who had heard shouting and loud noises coming from their flat. When police looked at Alessandro's movements in the days after Julia went missing, they made a big discovery that helped their case. In the days after she was reported missing, surveillance video showed that he went to the garage several times with bags on his back and then came back without them. As more and more proof came in, Alessandro's story started to fall apart. At some point, he gave up and told them where he had hidden her body. Julia's body was found by cops on June 1st, 2023, in an overgrown area near Sanago. The remains had been tried to be burned, but the process was stopped, according to forensic research. Authorities were able to figure out what killed him and get solid proof that he was responsible for the crime, even though he tried to hide his tracks. Italy was shocked when the sad story of Julia Tramontano's death came out. In a country where crimes against women have been a big problem for a long time, her case was another painful reminder of how dangerous people can be when they pretend to be loving partners. Protests broke out all over the country after Alessandro Impagnatiello was arrested. Women went out into the streets with signs calling for harsher punishments for crimes that start with domestic violence. A memorial march was held in Milan, Naples, Rome, and other cities, and people called for changes to the system to better protect those who are vulnerable. Carla Tramontano, Julia's sister, spoke out at one of the protests and asked lawmakers to do something about the shocking number of cases where people don't face real consequences until it's too late. At the same time, forensic experts and detectives tried to figure out what kind of person did it. A psychological exam of Alessandro showed some troubling behavioral traits. He had strong narcissistic traits, according to psychiatrists hired by the court. He didn't feel bad about what he did, and his actions during interrogations and court processes showed that he was deeply self-centered and had no empathy at all. He only saw other people through the lens of his own self-interest and didn't care about their feelings or experiences. He did what he did because he wanted to keep his image safe and keep control over the people around him. Any loss of power sets off a dangerous reaction right away. Alessandro tried to show he was sorry during the trial, but neither Julia's family nor the people believed him. He said he didn't know how he could have done something so terrible. He insisted it was an act of spontaneous anger that he wasn't even aware he was committing. But the authorities showed a lot of proof: his searches online for poisons, the attempt to poison someone, the fake DNA test, and the false report he gave to the police. All of these things showed that the crime was planned ahead of time. After Alessandro was caught and arrested, Allegra worked with the police. She showed him the messages they had sent each other, which proved he had lied to both her and Julia. She also talked about the fake DNA test and how he tried to trick her many times during the hearing. Because Allegra was a witness, the authorities called her to confirm important details, such as how Alessandro had hidden his double life, how he had lied about Julia's pregnancy, and the reasons he gave when the truth came out. The people in the courtroom said Allegra looked very upset. He might have told everyone the truth too late if she hadn't found those pictures on his phone by chance. During her statement, she talked about how guilty she felt toward Julia, even though she knew she had been lied to by him too. After the trial, Allegra wouldn't talk to reporters, stayed out of the public eye, and tried to separate herself from the tragedy. Later, she was said to have left Milan and moved to another city, trying to start over without having to think about this case. The court decided that Alessandro was guilty of first-degree murder with factors that made the crime worse. These included how cruel the crime was, how the victim was emotionally abused for a long time, and how he tried on purpose to destroy proof. he got a life term in prison. In his or her closing remarks, the judge made it clear that acts like these could not be excused by losing control or being emotionally upset for a short time. Over the course of several months, Alessandro's behaviors made it clear that he wanted to get rid of Julia. People who see their partners as things can hurt them, and her case was a sad reminder of that. But people did hear Julia's story. It made people angry and started a movement to protect people who still could be saved. Thanks for watching. If you found this story interesting, please like, comment, and subscribe for more true crime documentaries. See you in the next video.